Hey, everybody, Tim Kaine here. Thanks for letting me be late. I was in a Foreign Relations Committee hearing. President Trump has nominated a guy who is a January 6th election conspiracist, Doug Mastriano, to be ambassador to Slovakia. And there was a panel of other nominees, some highly qualified, but I was there to ask questions, and no one had asked Mr. Mastriano questions about his activities on the Capitol on January 6th, and I felt like that needed to be asked, and so I stayed till I could do it. A couple of things, Iran and a couple of pieces of legislation. Well, let me actually start first with some good news. The Older Americans Act reauthorization. We worked on this in the Health Committee about a year ago, and I played a key role in some provisions to strengthen advocacy for seniors, the Ombudsman Office within the government that works on advocacy for seniors in senior living facilities. We strengthened that. We strengthened provisions dealing with the direct care workforce that serve our seniors. And I also got a really good idea from Virginia's area agencies on aging. They said the Older Americans Act sort of sets up these agencies, but doesn't acknowledge the current reality that the agencies themselves have all kinds of agreements with public and private partners to expand services to seniors. And the act sort of didn't authorize those kinds of agreements. They need to happen. Public-private partnerships of this kind are great. So we got that change made. The bill passed the Senate earlier this week. I'm really happy about it. Now we need to make sure the House passes it too. Big bipartisan win. This week I introduced a couple of bills that are important. The Promise Act. The Promise Act. Wait a minute. I know bills by what they do, not by their title. The Promise Act is a bill that I've worked on with Senators Durbin, Cassidy, Tillis, Cornyn, and King to sort of establish a process to force Congress to make decisions to keep Social Security solvent. The Social Security, the Social Security Board, Advisory Board, put out a report within the last month or two showing that we will hit a point in 2032 where if we do not add to the solvency of Social Security, we'll have to start cutting benefits. Now, that's 6 years away, but that's within the term of everybody who's running for the Senate right now. Anybody running for the Senate right now will confront this question. And what we've learned on issues like Social Security is they don't get easier if you wait. They're easier if you start early. And so we have a bill that would establish a process whereby the Social Security Advisory Board would propose to the House and Senate a solvency proposal that would keep Social Security solvent for the next 50 years. That bill would then get introduced in each House and be subject to a somewhat expedited process, subject to amendment. So the fact that there's a proposal on the table with some time deadlines for considering it does not mean that that would be the proposal that would ultimately be voted on. It would still be subject to amendments and improvements. I have a Social Security proposal with Senator Cassidy dealing with establishing an investment fund and using the proceeds from that fund to come into the Social Security Trust Fund to supplement, add on to the way we currently finance Social Security. Others have different ideas. But what we need is kind of like the starting gun at the beginning of a race to say, okay, now we're into this discussion and we're going to have this discussion in a deliberate, thorough, but somewhat prompt way so that we can find a solvency path long before this deadline is staring us in the face. I'm really excited to be working on this bipartisan proposal. I reintroduced a bill with Senator Murkowski of Alaska called the Welcome Home Act, which is an act to help supplement the nation's healthcare workforce. There are hundreds of thousands of people in the United States who are immigrants lawfully in the United States, green card holders or having other designations, who were trained in healthcare fields. But because their healthcare training was in other nations, their credential hasn't transferred. And so they're here working not in healthcare fields, but other fields. And we really need it. We have shortages in many healthcare professions, especially some of the allied health professions. And so Senator Murkowski and I are kind of setting up a path to try to get as many qualified healthcare workers as we can who are immigrants lawfully here back into the healthcare workforce. And I'm excited to work with her on this. We're both on the Health, Education, Labor, Pension Committee, so I think we have an opportunity in the committee to move this legislation forward. Last thing I want to say, then I'll open it up, is just to continue to comment on the president's foolish and illegal war in Iran. I've maintained that the war has been illegal since the day it started, and also foolish since the day it started. But Congress has now acted by voting, despite both houses being Republican majority. Congress has voted on what's called a House Concurrent Resolution, an HCON-Res, pursuant to the War Powers Resolution, saying this war is illegal. You have to withdraw troops from hostilities unless Congress authorizes it. It's the first time in the history of the War Powers Resolution, it was passed in 1973, that Congress has looked the president in the eye and said, this is an illegal war. Very, very important historical precedent. President Trump can break the law or ignore the law, but he can't change the law. And so now there is a definitive declaration by the Article I branch, which has the unique power over whether or not to declare war, that the war is illegal. And we are using both that legal declaration, but also activity with respect to the appropriations process and the National Defense Authorizing Act to try to put up additional guardrails around funding or activities to further an illegal war. The war has cost the lives of 14 U.S. troops, including one Virginian, tragically, hundreds of other injuries, thousands of Iranian civilians injured, over $50 million spent out of the U.S. Treasury for this war, over $50 billion spent by American families to pay escalated fuel costs because of this war. And the president's start again, stop again, ceasefire, restart, we're going to control and toll the Straits of Hormuz. No, we're not. We're seeing the economic effects of this war, including the chaotic nature of President Trump's decision-making, have a real effect on the U.S. economy. Recent polling suggests that Americans are more pessimistic about the economy than any time in the last 5 years. Gallup poll in May showed 76% of Americans think the economy is going in the wrong direction, only 20% in the right direction, and the wrong direction, 3/4, heavily cite the war in Iran and its effect on gas and other everyday items they have to purchase, and then the tariff effect of what President Trump has done. And President Trump, to nobody's surprise, is now doubling down on his unwise tariff policy. The Supreme Court struck down his IEEPA tariffs in February, giving him an off-ramp from tariff mania that's driving up costs. But yesterday, the president announced the reimposition of tariffs on Brazil with the suggestion that more tariffs to come. It was interesting that the president started with Brazil. The president's argument is we get ripped off by other nations, as demonstrated by trade deficits. We have a massive trade surplus with Brazil. We sell an awful lot more to Brazil than Brazil sells to us. And so Brazil is kind of exactly the wrong case for the president to make the first case. But frankly, the president is not doing it because of trade. He's doing it because he's mad that Brazil is prosecuting a crony of his, disgraced former President Bolsonaro. And that's why he's imposing a tariff that will make American families pay more, American businesses pay more, and likely to lead to Brazil imposing retaliatory tariffs that will hurt American industries even more. So it's time that we find an end to both illegal and foolish wars and foolish tariff policies. We need the president to focus on the economy, on making things more affordable. We hear he may give a speech tonight. So far, what we're hearing, he's going to be talking about everything but what Americans want to hear him direct his attention to. I'm glad to open it up and take your questions.
Our first question is from Tom from Fox 5.
Senator, thank you for doing this today.
Hey, Tom.
Good to talk to you. Senator, as you may know, this morning, the Commission on Fine Arts started receiving a presentation from the White House today on a plan to massively expand the permanent fence, not only around the Ellipse, but also Lafayette Park, extending into the ends of Pennsylvania Avenue, effectively cutting it off from the public. for generations, these have been spaces of First Amendment activity. Also, people like to visit the nation's
Yeah,
capital and
absolutely.
the White House. I'd like to get your take on the rationale behind this. Now, as you just mentioned, we are at war with Iran right now, and the Secret Service recently expressed, as reported, concerns about the new Air Force One in regards to that. Do you see this as a security issue, or is this the White House basically sealing off these areas to the public?
Well, it's sealing off areas to the public, not just, for First Amendment protest activity, but I've sat on a bench in Lafayette Park and had a cup of coffee and visited with somebody, and the statue of Lafayette's beautiful, and that square with Blair House on one side and other important governmental buildings on the other is a beautiful part of the city. I get enhanced security measures at the White House. I get that. But taking these additional public spaces that people really enjoy and then walling them off from everyday citizens and visitors to the Capitol, big mistake in my view.
Thank you, Senator.
You bet, Tom.
Next is Lily from ABC 13.
Hey, Lily.
Hi, Senator Kane. Do you support the Sunshine Protection Act? And do you think that there's enough support in the Senate for it to move forward and ultimately become a law?
Lily, I don't support it. I don't think this sort of one size fits all solution for the entire country is a very good idea. And my colleague, Senator Cotton from Arkansas, gave a really wonderful speech about his opposition to the bill yesterday. That one of the best speeches I've seen given on the floor in some time. And he reminded everyone that, hey, Congress tried this before and passed it in the 1970s, and it seemed real popular at the time, and it was going to be a 2-year pilot project, and let's see how it goes. It generated so much opposition that within 6 months it was abandoned. And I have no reason to believe that the fate of it would be any different this time. So no, I am not yet a supporter of that bill.
Thank you.
Next question is from Ashley from WVNS.
Hey, Ashley. Okay, is Ashley there?
Hey, Ashley, we're having trouble hearing your audio. So perhaps you'd like to, I see you did type your question in the chat. I can just ask
Okay.
it for you.
Okay,
The
great.
question is,
I can see Ashley, but I can't hear. But yeah, go ahead, Janine.
the question is, do the recent acts you've passed and put forth have anything to do with the fact that this is the third oldest Congress in U.S. history?
Now, which one? The Older Americans Act?
The Older Americans Acts and also the Promise Act to protect Social Security.
Yeah, no, neither of those. Look, I think, the age of Congress is a really interesting issue, but neither are affected. Neither of those pieces of legislation affected. The Older Americans Act is an act that dates back decades. And every few years, we reauthorize and update it to, improve programming, recognize new strategies. So as an example, something new is the area agencies on aging that were established by the Older Americans Act have gotten really entrepreneurial with public-private partnerships and entering into all kinds of agreements to expand their services to seniors. The Older Americans Act was sort of written at a time when that was not the business model. Maybe it wasn't thought that the area agencies on aging would do that. So it's not like the act forbids it, but it's also not clear that the act permits it. And so updating the act to reflect the new reality about what our area agencies on aging do is something we needed to do. And it is part of a normal reauthorization that's done every few years. And I'll tell you, the Promise Act is driven by one thing. It's driven by the recent reports of Social Security that say we will, if we don't do anything, the mixture, the kind of actuarial mixture of who's paying in money and who's withdrawing benefits will cause us to have to begin cutting benefits as early as late 2032. The last time there was a major Social Security reform was in the 1980s, and it was a famous one. You know, Ronald Reagan, Republican president, Tip O'Neill, Democratic Speaker of the House, cut a bipartisan deal to extend Social Security solvency. But they did it right up against a deadline where benefits were going to be cut. The co-sponsors of the Promise Act were sort of, let's not wait till right up against the deadline. We got 6 years before the deadline. Let's tackle this now when the decisions, I think, are going to be a little bit easier than when we get right up against the deadline.
Gotcha. Thank you so much, Senator. I appreciate it.
You bet. Thanks.
Next is Emma from the Virginian Pilot.
Hey, Emma.
Hey, Senator Kane. I just wanted to follow up quickly on the helicopter that went down in the Arabian Sea. We lost Commander Gabe Edwards,
Horrible.
who was
Horrible.
spent, most of his career out here in Hampton Roads in the Navy, his 20-year career. I was just wondering, have you gotten any additional information about what might have caused that emergency landing or what happened to Commander Edwards?
We haven't. I haven't gotten any information about it, but I know that I will, because when something like this happens, the military takes it very, very seriously. They dig into the cause. And as a member of the Armed Services Committee, I'm sure I'm going to know as soon as there's a definitive answer about what was the cause. And then I'm going to do what I can to communicate that information to friends and family and to the broader public. I think the Virginia public wants to know, what happened in a case like this that led to the tragic death of a Virginian.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much.
You bet.
All right, those were everyone's questions. Thank you everyone for joining, and we'll follow up shortly with a video link.
Thanks so much.